Negative, Major Tom. Negative. It is imperative that you remain in the capsule. Oh boy, there you go.
It is the distant future, the year 2000.
Houston, we have a podcast.
Man, have you ever had these Toastier Girl Scout cookies?
No.
Does that, have you never heard of them?
No, I've never heard of that.
I feel like, I don't know how new they are. I feel like I learned about them, if not this year, maybe a previous year, because they look familiar, and I feel like I've heard it before, but it's basically a Girl Scout cookie that is Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
That sounds pretty good.
It's kind of amazing. My only problem is there's just not enough per bag.
Well, you know, that's how they get you. Those little cookie pushers they just give you just enough, and then get you a taste for it. Then you have to come back over and over again.
Yeah. I'm ashamed at how much money I would like to spend. Not that I did spend, but that I would like to spend on Girl Scout cookies.
I'm impugning the Girl Scout cookie industry. They need to, if they were serious, they would sell some more per go. Otherwise, these little bags that run out in a day. Although I may be telling on myself there, if I can demolish a box in like a day.
Yeah. Welcome to the Sad Boys Book Club. My name's Dusty, and I spent $25 on Girl Scout cookies this week.
And I'm Daniel, and I've spent $0.
Leviathan Wakes. What is this, part 3 now?
Yes, this is part 3 of Leviathan Wakes, and yeah, quite a part. We've been kind of doing roughly 100 pages at a go, and this time we decided, so because we realized that we were about 360 pages away, just about even, we can just bump it up 20 pages per session, and then by that point we can finish it in 3 instead of 4.
Yeah, so, yeah, there was a lot that happened here.
Yeah, last episode, I said, not really too much happened, I guess, maybe some character development, blah, blah, but this was like, it was like setting the table for this, and, yeah, a lot of things that we predicted, so, we are the book knowers. That's why you come here, for that sterling analysis.
Yeah, I find it really funny that, and I told you this week while we were reading, that we were talking about the Rocinante and it coming from Don Quixote and being his horse, and you made the comment about how it seems like Holden and his crew are on a pretty quixotic adventure, and we get the bit where Miller finds the Roci, looks into what it is, finds out it's from Don Quixote, and mentions that this whole thing is pretty quixotic, isn't it? And I was like, wow, it's like you read ahead.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. I'll try to remember some of our predictions if we come across them while we're talking about the book. But I probably won't, to be honest. But I will try. I just remember there's a couple times when I was like, oh yeah, we talked about that.
I'd be hard pressed to call this so much a prediction more than just an inference based on the structure of the story. So I don't want to go as far as to say I totally predicted that Miller and Holden were gonna meet up in the plot, because I mean that I feel like that's kind of obvious. So I don't want to sit there and be like, oh, I totally predicted that. But yeah, we finally got...
I will, however. I totally predicted that. If you recall, I said he got fired, and that's how they're going to meet up. So I'm here to take all the credit. Low hanging fruit, high hanging fruit. It's all fruit, baby. We're making the fruit punch right here.
And that was part of my reason for asking you last time, what do you think is next for Miller now that he's fired? Because my whole thought process was he has now been essentially unchained from Sarah Station, and he can now do whatever he wants, and that is ostensibly what he did. But yeah, we got Miller and Holden meeting up finally, and where we have to jump to really quickly just to where we've ended for this section. Miller is now on the Roci with the crew, not necessarily a member of the crew, but I feel like that's just unofficial at this point.
I think it's just going to continue to have that feeling until maybe the end, and then they'll be then moving forward. They'll be like this moment, something to the effect of, "Well, I don't have anywhere to go, but I don't know what I'm gonna do in the future." And then Holden's gonna be like, "Well, we need one more person on our crew if you want," and then they'll be like, "Yes," and then that's it. So that classic trope.
I will say when obviously you get the whole Holden chapter when they land on Eros Station, building up with the whole hey, we're being followed by someone, and obviously we know it's Miller. Because of the Miller chapter previous ends with him waiting, being like, all right, if this is Holden and the crew, if I was right and the Rocinante is Holden, then they're going to be coming through one of these doors any minute now. And then the next chapter is, then they came through the doors. So, obviously it was Miller. But the end of that chapter, when they're in the, and we'll go into more detail later, but when they're in the shootout in the hotel, and Miller ostensibly introduces himself in a very explosive manner to the crew, my reaction to that was like if Gene Parmesan was just revealed to me.
Oh my god, it's Miller.
Yeah, I was just I've been waiting for this, man. Like this is it's been building for the entire book, and it finally happened, and it was so perfect. I love it. It's such a great way to bring these characters together. Not just specifically the shootout at the hotel, but the entirety of the Eros storyline. And while, like I said, we'll go into more detail in a bit for this, but just to throw some general thoughts out there, the whole time we have Miller and Holden together, and then at first, you have that clash of who's in charge here. Holden's like being super jealous, like, well, hey, I'm the captain here, and Miller's just doing what he does, not necessarily trying to usurp any form of control from Holden, just being someone who is like, I have more information, at least of what's going on in the not so much with the virus from Phoebe Station. Not so much with that, but more so with the riot gear thugs that came from Sarah Station, which that comes back into play, and him having an in with one of the cops there, whose name I have somewhat forgotten. It was like Sematimba.
Let me flip to that.
I don't have my book on me.
It's kind of like that, but let me hop back real quick.
Yeah, but so you have that like the mistrust and almost a dick measuring contest going on with Holden and Miller, but then like once that starts to subside a little bit and it's more so about we're in trouble, we need to get off the station or we're going to die, then it kind of becomes Miller and Holden working together. And there's such a great line from Naomi when they're in the maintenance tunnel hiding, and Miller and Holden are just talking to each other like, it'd be smarter for us to wait here for the guards to pass and so we can get out free. Yeah, it would be smart if we did that. I'm kind of curious to see what's going on. Yeah, me too. And you have that little bit going on right there, and Naomi says, you guys are going to be very bad for each other, and by extension, us. And what a perfect way to just completely summarize how I feel the relationship between Miller and Holden is going to be.
Yeah, I thought that was very apt. It was just funny. Like Naomi's just like, oh boy, she's smart. She knows the score. She already sees exactly what these guys are going to bring out in each other.
Yeah, it's great, man. This is, and over the course of the last maybe 150, 175 pages we've read, my opinion on Miller has only been growing. I've always felt that he was, like from the start of the book, that he was a character that I was always going to find interesting and engaging. But as I had said in, I think the first part, Naomi was my favorite character so far, and she is still a great character. She's been consistently great the whole way through, and I love her relationship with the crew of the Roci. Individually, like Holden and her have a great relationship. Amos and her have a great relationship. Alex is just kind of there, but whatever.
He comes in to say, "Hey y'all, there's a problem," or something like that, or what? He's kind of that character, which you usually see in like TV shows, but it's in books it's kind of like harder because you're reading and you're like, where did he go?
Yeah, as of right now, it feels like he's important to the crew, but he's not important to the plot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think as of now, Miller is my favorite character, followed by Naomi. I love him. He's so great. His story is so fascinating, and you get everything building up to him finding the crew, how he finds the crew, how they interact together once they're together, and everything going on behind the scenes with Miller, the things that we only get when he's the perspective character, with his relationship with the imaginary Julie in his mind, and his way of thinking of things, how like we get to see his analytical, investigative brain, and we also get to see the emotional side of him where all of these things are going wrong and how he's kind of coping with it. And it's just, he's such a great character. He's so well written, he's so well expressed, and his motivations are just really well crafted. They're well thought out. They're really well executed. He's just such a great character. I'm so happy every single time I'm reading a Miller chapter. Which isn't to say that I'm not reading the Holden chapters being like, all right, come on, let's get back to Miller already. They're great too. And there's a lot we could talk about Holden too being a great character. But Miller's my favorite character right now.
I think Miller is a little bit more of a rich text in terms of what's going on with him mentally and his sort of experiences, how they've kind of shaped him to be who he is now. Holden is kind of, he's not bad by any means, but he does read a bit more generic sci-fi good guy, whereas Miller has a little bit more texture to him by virtue of being a little bit of a screw up, being a little bit of an alcoholic, his ambivalence to killing, but his also questioning, like, is that that's kind of a bad thing. I really, why am I like that? He's a little bit more of an interesting character to read about from that perspective.
Yeah, he seems
to have a little bit more of an eternal life.
He's a much more dynamic character, I feel like, is a way to word it.
Yeah. And speaking of Miller, he is basically our opening point of view character for this. So I guess where we find him is he's kind of kicking around the station after being fired. He's kind of seeing the way things are going. He's seeing, like, the station's kind of moving towards this. And I know we say this often, but if you're reading along, or if you've read this book in the past, you'll see, like, it's continuously mentioned, like, this buildup of anti-Martian sentiment. Like, at the beginning, he's trying to get these. He's walking and he's seeing this riot kind of forming, and there's, like, these speakers that are speaking very eloquently and passionately about things like freedom and self-determination and things of that nature about and basically just at this point a fairly anti-Mars sentiment. And he sees some teenagers going there, and he knows it's kind of going to, based on his perception of the crowd, it's going to get out of control, and he's kind of asking them not to go, and that it's not a good idea. And they're just kind of, they just kind of brush him off. But that is kind of showing, like, I guess it just kind of feels like I think he feels like he's kind of lost his place. He doesn't really have any authority. He's just not really. It just feels like he's not this is no longer the place for him anymore. He's lost his job. He just doesn't seem to be fitting in with the current cultural moment that's going on Sarah's station. This is something that I remember that you alluded to, that it was confirmed. The OPA at this point has kind of assumed control of the Saris government. You were kind of talking about is this some sort of OPA sort of soft coup or something of that nature? And that does appear to have been the case. The OPA does seem to be running the show at the moment.
I predicted that. I was right.
Exactly. Promises made, promises kept.
Medium hanging fruit. Boys. I'm taking it.
We are the literature boys. We are the book knowers. So anyway, so that's kind of the vibe that's going down. Anyway, he gets a call from Havelock, and that's basically just like it's kind of like a not so well disguised exposition dump to kind of give you the broader state of the galaxy, but it's okay because it's interesting information. It's he's basically confirming another thing that we were talking about, that Earth is viewing this conflict as really too dangerous to be too heavily involved in, so they're pulling out, and they're saying they literally said, despite how much money they could be losing getting out of the Saris station and other stations that could even be conceived to be as part of this broader conflict, they're hedging their bets, and they're like, okay, well, we're gonna go ahead and try to turtle down and try to stay out of this. See, I'm trying to remember what else he mentions. He mentions putting in a good word for him at a different job that Havelock got, but I'm going to be honest, I kind of stopped paying attention to Havelock a little bit. He pops up a couple times on phone calls during this section, but I couldn't tell you where he works now or what the whole deal was, but I just remember...
You weren't paying attention then, because I was going to ask you, do you remember what company he's working for now?
No. See, I that completely slipped my mind.
He's working
Maybe I would paid attention at the... go ahead.
He's working for Protogen.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that's important now.
Okay. Well, and this is why it's good to do... This is why it's kind of nice to have the book club, because we can catch these little things that might slip out by us.
As soon as later on, when Miller got the information from the thug that Protogen was the one that set them up for that at Eros, I was like, oh shit! Isn't that who Havelock's working for right now?
That was okay. Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. Well, I'm glad I mentioned that, because otherwise that reveal probably would have caught me a little bit flat-footed.
I do feel like I should double check and make sure that is what I remember him bringing up Protogen for sure, but I feel like I should double check that all the same. But I remember him saying he was
page 206. That's my notes from that part.
Yeah, it looks like 206 is when he's talking to Havelock.
Yeah.
I've signed on with Protogen Security, big company, private army bullshit, but the pay is worth putting up with their delusions of grandeur.
Yep. And there's the thing. Next thing he says is the contract's supposed to be on Ganymede, but with crap playing out the way it is now, who knows how it'll go. Turns out Protogen's got a training base in the belt. So I don't know. Maybe Ganymede. Keep an eye on that and see. Maybe Havelock comes back into play. Or maybe the plot kind of goes towards Ganymede at some point.
Yeah. I do feel like all of these named locations on the map, on the inside cover of the book, are important, at least somewhat. Though, like I said, you can see Titania over on Uranus. And is it Uranus?
Yeah. I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, so I'm looking, and we've got all of the belts, the belt locations that are named, and those are important locations so far in the novel. And all these other moons, and obviously Earth and Mars. And then I see that, and I'm like, is that gonna be a thing later? I think I said this last week too.
So, I think it's probably, most of them will be, but maybe some will not, and they'll be more important in like subsequent books. Because this series goes on for like it's like 8 books, right? And then like a couple short 9, okay, and like a few short stories too on top of that. So I don't know. Maybe they hit all these locations, or maybe like those are just kind of generally important locations in the story. The broader story. I mean, not just Leviathan Wakes.
Yeah. I mean, it could very well just be something like they're on Phoebe Station and they're like, oh, all of this came from Titania, and that's why it's important. It could be something like
Okay.
that. I don't know. I feel like it's named for a reason on the map, and that reason could very well be something that it gets mentioned and it's important for some reason, but it's not somewhere they go. I don't know. This is just, once again, a theory or a prediction that the names mean something. Why would you not put Titania in the book if it's on the map?
That's fair. I think that's probably the best way to look at it. I'm just I don't know. I'm of the opinion that that's a lot of locations for like things like Mercury and Venus. I just don't foresee them really coming into the play of this.
Well, that's a little different. I mean, you gotta show the planets at this point. You gotta, because you could, I guess,
so.
have the balls there. I think naming the planets is different than naming a specific moon on a planet or a specific station on the belt.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. But anyway, getting back to our old pal Miller. He's still looking into this case, and he managed to get back about 3/4 of his data requests before they pulled access on him after he got the hook. So he's reviewing it, and I don't know. In a stroke of astonishing luck, he stumbles upon a shipping log for the Rocinante, which is described in the records as being a gas hauler. But what's interesting here that he kind of picks up is that it's going between two
Gas consumers.
gas consumers. They're importing their gas rather than an export. So he finds that to be pretty notable. He starts to kind of dig down, what is going on, and that's when he actually makes the Don Quixote comparison.
Yeah, and that's I think on top of, because he was about to delete the entry and move on to the next ship because there was nothing really to see. It was the OPA ostensibly screwing up and having them go from, is it Palace? Palace? I don't know.
Let me look again. I don't remember. I just remember the broad strokes, but I just know they were going from somewhere to Eros. I thought it was Tycho, but I'm not sure.
No, they were. I think the log was they were going from Palace to Tycho, and that was what made him pause all of a sudden, where he was like, "Wait a minute, why would a gas hauler go from gas consumer to gas consumer? That's just not how you make money. That's weird." And
I do think that is a little bit of a leap, though. That's like, I mean, is it weird? Yeah, probably, but there could just as easily be like an actual reason for it. Like, I don't know, maybe they need to get a specific repair done at one port. Maybe it's changing hands. Maybe it's. I feel like that I would need a little bit more to go on before I decided. Oh, yep, there it is. There's the OPA front ship.
Maybe I don't know. I'm by no means an expert on anything like that.
Well, I mean, it's a good observation. It is a good observation. I'm not saying that it isn't. I'm just saying that I feel like we got a little bit. I mean, he got his hunch turned out correct. So I guess I can't say too much, but it does feel like he jumped the gun just a little bit.
I don't really feel like that's out of character for him to have just ostensibly jumped the gun like that. He even says to himself, "I'm taking a real gamble here. I only really have enough money to see this through once." And if I'm wrong, then, well, I guess I'm just going to have to look for work again. And yeah, it is convenient that he finds the Roci, and it's exactly what he needs, and he gets the info from Havelock that, hey, by the way, they're going to, which we'll get into that too, they're going to Eros, not Tycho, so for him to change course to Eros. I guess there are some levels of plot convenience there, but I'm willing to forgive it, because the work was done to lead Miller to this point, and I feel like it necessarily wouldn't have been the most interesting thing to have like 2 chapters where it's really just about him narrowing it down specifically to the Roci, because we knew that he was going to find them. Like, obviously, he was going to find them in some manner and make his way to them. The question wasn't if, it was when. And the way it was handled, yeah, maybe there was a little bit of ass-pulling going on, but I can hand-wave a lot of it, because he's proven that he's competent when he tries, and he was given the information he needed to find them. All he needed to do was put the pieces together, and maybe he did it a little quickly, but it's fine, because it lets the plot move a little more fluidly, rather than just having more of him being on Ceres just waiting for something to do.
I think that's fair. Maybe there was in the past, like in an original edit of this book, there maybe that went on a little bit longer, but I'm going through it, and you edit it down, you start to look and try to put only in the parts that you feel are most needed or really drive the plot. So maybe it was just something like that, and they just made that editorial decision, which, my minor nitpicks aside, I think that probably was the right pick from an editorial and plot pacing standpoint. But also, I just want to throw out that I think at this point, and I don't know that we've talked a little bit about how he has this sort of imaginary version of Julie Mao that he kind of has with him. And he even starts to kind of see, hallucinate, I guess is the best way to put it. But it is like a visual hallucination of Julie. And he's now at this point, he's starting to talk to it. And it's starting to talk to him. Which is, is not like hugely influential to the plot at this point, but I did find it notable and just wanted to bring it up because it is something that starts to happen in this section of the book, and I'd like to see. That's another thing that I should have mentioned when I was talking about how Miller is a little bit of a more interesting character. Start to see, or I want to see how it all shakes out. But yeah, that's it for Miller and his portion there, and then we cut back to Holden. And this is a part, I'm going to say it, not a fan of Holden in this part. Very not a fan of Holden. He's just so annoying. He's just got this like silly, annoying grind set, can't sit still mentality that I find very, very annoying. I'm picturing myself in the place of like Amos or Alex or Naomi. And he's like, okay, well, we got to get off the ship. We got to go somewhere. We got to do this. We got to do that. They've been there for like 2 days or like 3 days or so a very small amount of days, less than a week. And he's just bugging out, just pacing, kind of like wheedling and pleading for them to leave. And I'm like, dude, just shut up. Just enjoy being put up in a very nice hotel by the OPA. Just relax, eat your grapes, eat your, you go down, play a few hands of blackjack in the casino. It's just chill, all right, man. Just calm down a little bit.
Well, I mean, to be fair, he had been taking the Canterbury. Well, okay, I can only say this by only knowing his internal dialogue about it, but seemingly he had been taking the Canterbury in a lot of ways worse than some of the others, which is not to... I feel like everybody is still struggling with it, but I think the crew is trying to find distraction and relaxation to try and not fixate on it, but Holden, he still has a lot of emotions about the Canterbury. I mean, rightfully so. A lot of people died just weeks ago at this point, including the woman he was seemingly in love with at the time. So I can understand him feeling trapped on Tycho, especially given that they really are they're in a gilded cage.
I just want to state for the record that it would have been much better for them had they stayed in the gilded cage.
Sure, it would have been better for them, but it wouldn't have been better for the plot, and that's what I care about. But yeah, so I can understand him feeling like a prisoner and not wanting to be about that, especially after the whole point after they got the Roci was, we're going to make our own rules, we're going to live our own lives. And yeah, they were living in luxury, sure.
But that's such cope, though. Like this, like, oh, we're gonna make our own rules. It's just a very immature look at the reality. The way that they live in their society. There is no we make our own rules. Like everything is run by corporations. And they live in a the OPA. They're doing their best, but they're mostly just living in these like very they're caught between the militaristic Martians and these like this like total corporatocracy of the belt stations. It's just not realistic to like go play pirate in the belt, and then it's just like what is the point? Like there's no. And it would be different if he had some sort of like broader vision for what he wants to do, or like grand design, or like ideological backing, or just anything other than nobody's going to tell me what to do. It's just like, okay, dude, cool.
Yeah, there's
good luck with that.
There certainly is a bit of childishness involved in his decision making, but he's just been through two major tragedies, and he's had all of this responsibility forced upon him, and I don't think he was necessarily ready for it, but he was the only one that feasibly could take up the mantle. So I feel like all of that, and him, I don't know if it's necessarily guilt. I don't know if he's feeling guilty about the Canterbury, because, I don't know, maybe he's having survivor bias, or survivor guilt.
Yes, he definitely does have survivor's guilt.
Yeah, so a big part of this is he wants to find the ship still that destroyed them, and now, as he said it, now we have the teeth for it. So I can understand.
They just don't. He saw the borders, how much power they were dealing with. If the Martian, if the Donager can't deal with it, he doesn't have the power in his, in his little gunship, It just, I don't know. I found him very frustrating to read. Not in a bad way. I mean, I'm not saying that it was bad writing or anything. I'm just saying that I just fundamentally disagreed with his decision making. So it's not like, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, well, the character did something I disagree with, so, everything is ruined for me. It's just... I'm not really like that, but I appreciate, and I like where the plot does end up going. Don't get me wrong, but it just reading it is just like, yeah, I'm just still not at a place where I really like Holden as a character, or I feel like I would like to be around him. I think he is an interesting character in the sense that he makes decisions that are interesting to the plot, certainly. But it's just like, man, I wish I had a major character that I was really down with. I mean, the closest I get is Naomi, and I like her, but she's not really like she's a bit of a side character. Both of the POV characters are she's not one of the POV characters, is the point.
Yeah, and I do feel like this book is supposed to be the vehicle of Holden's character growth, because I do still feel like he's got a lot of growing to do, because we even see it on Eros with his brash decision making that Miller's just like, what the hell are you doing? Why? And he's still making really just dumb calls and not really thinking about the safety of his crew as much as he should be. So I do feel like this is all supposed to be part of him growing as a character and eventually becoming a suitable captain, the captain that he is supposed to be, someone that McDowell would be proud of as following in his footsteps. I think that's all part of the building up the path to that.
That's true. I mean, Luke Skywalker was just kind of a whiny farm boy until basically the end of A New Hope. So, I mean, there is potential for growth. I don't mean to say anything too negative. I'm just saying that he's got some growing to do still.
Yeah, and I do think that is the point. I don't think we're necessarily supposed to be thinking, even if you like Holden at this point, which I do like Holden. I think he's a great character, and I think he's got great potential as a character. But I'm even sitting here thinking, I'm agreeing with Miller a lot of the time, being like, dude, Holden, what the hell are you doing, man? Like, just take a step back and let someone more competent take control for a minute. And I understand it's his sense of responsibility and it's his sense of doing what he thinks is right, but it is getting in his own way sometimes, and that's something I think he needs to grow out of.
Well, and to be fair, that is true. There's a lot of people that are really like that. They want to be their own person. They're not quite ready to take the reins, that kind of thing. So it's not like he is a poorly written character. I hope I've gotten that across. But it's just one of those things, like when you're in his mind, his point of view, you're like, well, I don't know that I like I don't agree with his decision making or his viewpoint here. But anyway, he kind of he goes on and he's kind of wheedling. He kind of gets the crew to be they kind of get him to calm down a little bit. Be like, okay, well, let's just wait a week. Let's just relax a little bit. Let's let things take care of themselves. And then he basically goes behind all their backs and goes to Fred's office, which I found this pretty amusing, where he says that this office is big and intimidating. He refers to Fred's office as big and intimidating, but it is only let me see if I can find that passage. 2.5 square meters. Do you want to know how big that is in square feet?
Not perfectly. 2.5.
26 square feet.
Yeah, that's not big.
So I thought that was kind of humorous, and I think that was meant to be humorous, by the way, or at least show a difference in perspective. It's just like this idea, like this guy, working out of a closet, and he's like, wow, this is such a big office. I'm so intimidated by this big office. But like we said, they kind of have to. You have to be very judicious about your use of space in space. So anyway, he basically he's talking to Fred, and it starts off laid back enough, but Fred kind of lets slip that things are not going so well for the OPA from this perspective. They're getting a lot of and this is one of the travails of like these kind of a problem with like a very decentralized organization like the OPA seems to be. You've got people that are going on these like pirate broadcasts, which are like these unofficial, unlicensed broadcasts, and they're basically claiming to speak for the OPA. And they're saying like they're ginning up this kind of outrage, and they're trying to get some like irregular forces and just people out in the belt to start attacking Martian vessels, Martian freighters, that kind of thing. And it's kind of creating this problem where war is becoming more and more inevitable from that standpoint, because the Martians are now starting to get a little twitchy, and they're shooting, and they're shooting sooner, But it's also this situation where, you're getting all these belters wound up. It becomes this feedback loop of aggression. And this might speak to there being, and like we've kind of talked about in the past or speculated about, this idea of like a secondary OPA faction that is maybe has a more militant posture, a little bit more aggressive posture than does people like Fred and Dawes. But I think that I take Fred, at least for now, at his word that these are just kind of like but these broadcasts that are by people just claiming OPA but are not really actually part of the membership of the organization. So anyway, they're kind of talking about that, and he kind of wheedles Fred into like, oh, maybe we could go do something, or maybe we could go somewhere, and then Fred is like, no, don't do that. We don't need you to do that. Please stay here in this very nice setup we got for you. Just relax. We're still working on getting the on getting this trial together, and it starts kind of friendly, but then it basically Holden doesn't know when to quit, so he just keeps going until the point where it becomes a little bit of a confrontation, and he says something really, really cringe. Something like, well, actually, at some point, Fred is like, "Hey, okay, we do need to use the Rocinante though. We need to make a run to Eros Station to go pick someone up." And that's when Holden's like, oh yeah, well, we could do that. Yeah, how about we do that? And then that's when the back and forth about, well, no, just stay here, that kind of thing. And at this point, at some point, he says something like that was really cringe. It was like, look, you're the big dog here. Even if I didn't know who you used to be, you'd scare the shit out of me. So don't feel the need to prove it. But no matter how scared I am not backing down on this. Fred's hoped-for laughter did not come, and I was like, "Dude, please have like a modicum of dignity here, please. Do not." I don't know. I'm just not vibing with Holden right now. But anyway, he continues to wheedle this guy until he finally gets his way, and they decide to disguise the Rocinante with some. Like containers, these fake containers, to make it actually look like a gas hauler, and so that's kind of cool. Like this idea of it's kind of souped up into this other, it changes the form factor, and they say something like, so yeah, some pirate out there is going to get a nasty surprise. I don't know. It's just I think that's kind of cool. Maybe that speaks to the juvenilia in me, but I just like the idea of this ship that's disguised as one thing, and then it's boom, surprise, it's an attack ship. It's the Transformers effect, if you will.
Yeah, I will say though, it's super presumptuous of Fred to be like, hey, gonna need your ship for a mission, so I'm just gonna have a crew use your ship. I think it's totally fine for Holden to be like, you need my ship, you need my crew then.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think Fred should have said, okay, well, I'm not asking. You're going to be now under lock and key. But that's just because I'm annoyed with Holden right now.
But at that point, Holden would just be like, all right, cool, find another ship then.
Well, I mean, if they just take it, there's not a lot he can do about it. But I don't know. I think there's both have a little bit of a point. Like I think it was a silly and unnecessary risk to send Holden on this mission, especially when things come out the way that they, as we will see, they go way worse than anyone possibly could have imagined. But I do think there is a little bit of maybe over bureaucracy, a little. I think that Fred Johnson needs to he needs to start to act a little bit. He needs to do one of two things. He either needs to like really put the hammer down on the Holden crew and be like, no, like you guys are here. Basically, your entire lives are under my purview. So you're gonna go along with it, and well, it doesn't even matter if you like it. You're gonna do it. Or he needs to cut them in a little bit more and give them a little bit more rope, a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more, keep them in the loop so that they feel like they're more partners in the thing. He needs to pick a path. This sort of like middle path goes to this point where you end up with this situation where he sends them off on this mission that by all rights should have been a suicide mission. Well, as we will see.
I don't think it's fair to say it should have been a suicide mission. Fred definitely thought that there were some risks involved, but I don't think he was expecting it to be what it was, because I don't think anybody could have, to be fair. But
that's what I'm saying. I'm like, I kind of mentioned that earlier, is like it went worse than anybody could have possibly imagined.
Yeah, but Fred did get what he needed out of them, to be fair. One of the things that he had Holden agree to in order to have them accept the mission was you record your depositions and you sign that it's valid. So he doesn't necessarily need them in person for this hypothetical trial if he has their signed depositions for it anyways. I imagine having them in person would be better, but he has technically what he needs at this point.
In a very technical standpoint, but I'm just thinking about the trial. Just imagine you get these guys on the, you get the guys who perpetrated this on the stand, and they're like, and these people had this to say about about the crime, and then it's just their signed deposition, and you can't ask follow-ups. Any good person that was defending the people that committed this atrocity would make hay of that, being like, okay, well, so where are they then? Why aren't they here? Why aren't they here to back up their testimony or to, all that stuff? They're like, okay, they're dead. Well, then how do we know this isn't fake? They're especially if it's like there's like an intra party trial where there's stakes involved in both parties, like especially in this case, impugning the other and trying to pass the blame. If they can't come to a reasonable understanding of the facts, which I think the actual presence and availability of the witnesses, at least in the minds of whoever is going to decide the case. I mean, we know to a certain extent the facts as viewers of the story through the lens of being like book readers, but if people are actually in that moment, I think they're more likely to listen to real people rather than here's a signed piece of, well, not paper, probably, I don't know, space paper, a signed PDF that says whatever happened. I think there is a value to having them there to have them there to elaborate on certain points.
Sure, it would be better if they were there in person. And this is me extrapolating what I assume the path of the series is going to go down, and I don't think it's fair to put this expectation on any of the characters, but I'm feeling like the trial is never even going to come close to happening.
Oh yeah. That's definitely, like, I mean, as a reader, we can assume that, but in that world, you should, if you're Fred, you should assume the trial is going to happen. But as a reader, I have no confidence that the trial will ever occur at any point.
And that being said, I don't suspect Fred would have allowed them to leave if he thought they were in any real form of danger.
I think he definitely thought that this was going to go a lot smoother than it ended up being.
I think he thought it was suspicious, but nothing that would have been majorly life-threatening.
But yeah, that's kind of the end of Holden until we get to the story, and that's just kind of how Holden wraps up his story, like pre the big event of the preceding chapters.
So Miller, he has Havelock. He sends him the information on the Rocinante in his reply to his first video, asking him just to keep an eye on it, using the intel that he can get, and let him know if anything changes. And he buys a ticket to Tycho to go try and meet up with them. And as he's about to board, Havelock sends him a message being like, "Hey, they just left Tycho Station and are heading to Eros." And he's like, "Oh, okay." So he gets a partial refund on his ticket, buys another ticket, which costs most of his remaining money. Not most, but I think it was a third. And hops on a shuttle to Eros instead. And so this is kind of jumping back a little bit to him being fired and him spending this couple of days post firing. Do you think it would be fair to say that when he was fired from Star Helix, more than just his job was taken from him, his home was taken from him?
You mean like home as a concept, not home as
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think that is to a certain extent, like, because I think that was his emotional tie to the station, because he's in this portion. There's a couple things that he says that I think are quite telling. He says that he's like in his like early 50s, right? Something like that.
Yeah, like late 40s, early 50s, something like that.
He said that he's only been off station 5 times in his life, which, it's not a whole lot, especially when you consider how small the station is compared to like just even like a city, on Earth. If you think about it, he's been living his entire life in this for the most part, in this very small contained environment. And then but that's kind of what he knew. That's what he came to, if not love, it just enculturated into. But he also talks about, he also mentions that he starts to, at some point, he feels relief when he's thinking about, like, I'm finally leaving Ceres. And, I can understand that from a certain point. I think most people have felt that before, like this, finally leaving somewhere where they've kind of felt stuck or trapped, or they're just ready to move on. It's just there is a certain feeling of relief when you finally can turn that page.
Yeah, and he when he's talking to the reverend or the preacher, whatever he was, on the shuttle, he does kind of have that realization when the preacher guy asks him, more or less, are you gonna miss it? And he comes to that realization, and he just starts laughing. And the preacher guy's like, did I say something funny? I'm sorry. And I think that's what that was, is Miller having that complete disconnect with what was for his entire life his home, and knowing that now he's ostensibly a nomad.
Mm-hmm. The space hobo.
So Miller makes it to Eros first, and it's this giant. It's the original Belter asteroid community, I guess, the first, or like the original station, and it's only really used for ship repairs and its massive casino. So it's a bit of a half business, half pleasure kind of place. So he gets there first,
yeah,
and he's waiting for them, and they get there, and they have to go to a hotel, and we didn't go into this. The reason why they're going there, this person that they're supposed to pick up, it's a person that doesn't exist technically. It is the pseudonym, no, not a pseudonym. It is the imaginary name of an imaginary person who owned the Scopuli. And that was a red flag for Fred, and that's why he's like, we need someone to go to this hotel and find the person that checked in under this name. I forgot what the name was. It's not super important. I need someone to go and figure that out. So they're going to head to the hotel. So the crew gets there, and they're heading to the hotel, and they're being tailed by what we understand is Miller. And it is Miller. And they make it to the hotel, and there is a prostitute there just kind of chilling. And they go to the kiosk to try and see if the person that checked in is still there. And the prostitute holds them up. and is like, hey,
Was it a prostitute?
well, they think it was. Or Holden thinks it is. He sees her as a prostitute that's nearing the end of her viable age.
Wow, harsh.
Yeah, that's just. So she holds them up at gunpoint. Amos pulls his gun on her, and suddenly a bunch of dudes burst from the stairwell, light them up, but end up only lighting up the prostitute instead. And a major gunfight ensues.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. Like they really had that was a very surprising moment to me to see the only people that they ended up killing was their own person that they had trying to take Amos in. They were even saying something. I remember they were like, they kept yelling, "Hold your fire," at first, but then I think one of their guys freaked out and started shooting, and the whole thing went sideways from there.
Well, what it was Amos was returning fire, so they kind of had to keep shooting.
Oh, really? I guess I forgot that Amos started shooting at them first.
Which, I mean, why wouldn't he? Let's be real here.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty surprising situation when people they roll up with with these guns and start pointing them at you. It's gonna be it's gonna go sideways pretty quickly.
Yeah, so they're starting to be flanked by someone, and Alex is just he's there technically, but he's not. And Holden's like, Alex, you got to take care of the dude that's flanking us. And then the dude gets killed, and they're like, whoa, what? And they see Miller, who's there and firing in the stairwell. So Holden's like, hey, don't shoot the dude in the hat that's been following us. He's here. So they kill, I think, 4 people total, and the rest of the guys they retreat. So then we have our big climactic meetup between Holden and Miller, where he's like, I'm Miller, are you a cop? Well, no, I'm not. But we need to call the cops. So Miller calls his buddy.
I think you're right. It was Samatimba.
Yeah, he calls him and he's like, hey, well, you should know what happened already, huh? And he's like, no, what? And he's like, well, there were some shots fired at this hotel. And he's like, anybody dead? And he's like, were there shots fired? And he's like, yeah, a few. So he learns
that
why
was pretty amusing.
That was a great little retort. And he decides that they should go check out the room itself. And so they go down the hallway and make it to the room. Nothing has happened again yet. They get inside. The room's been trashed. And in the bathroom...
and so, yeah, they end up finding the corpse of Julie Mao. And she is in quite a state.
Yeah, she is.
It's actually quite unpleasant. Everything that's happened to her. She has like these strange and repulsive growths coming out of her. It talks about coils of complex growth spilled from her mouth and eyes, like all of her orifices. There's like these weird tendrils coming out, and her ribs and spine had grown spurs like knives that stretched her pale skin, ready to cut themselves free of her. A deep brown slush leaked from her, filling the shower pan almost 3 centimeters high. And to that, I have to say, Jesus Christ! Could you imagine coming into some scene like that? That would be nightmarish.
Yeah, and then something that happened before that too is Miller found her hand terminal and bagged it up in an evidence bag without touching it.
Oh yeah,
and put that aside.
Yeah, I think yeah, he did that, and then so that was pretty just horrible. I had to go back and read that a couple times, like, or maybe at least one other time, because I was just like, I moved on to the next page, and to the point where he's talking with his fellow, well, his former fellow police officer, and I was just like, I need to go. Did I really read? And then there it is. And they were talking about how like there's like these black marks like in the bed. They're seeing them on the wall, and it's gruesome. Just like, it is gruesome. It is like Resident Evil 7, like, or just any kind of like body horror you care to imagine. like that kind of stuff. It is the stuff of nightmares. But anyway, Miller, he's at this point they're together, and Miller's kind of trying to cool things over with Sematimba. He kind of tells him like, hey, we these guys got ambushed, but we think they're tied into with the cops somehow, and the reason he guesses that is because Sematimba and nobody at the police knew what had happened. They hadn't heard about the gunshots until Miller himself had made that contact. So there is something there. That's kind of our first clue that there is something really amiss going. Well, the first clue was the festering corpse of Julie Mao, but the second clue was the fact that the police seem unaware of this really high intensity. Like, we're talking hundreds of gunshots, and they nobody heard of anything about it. So anyway, that's kind of how they kind of get that figured out. And as they're kind of leaving, Naomi kind of pulls aside Holden, and she kind of because they've kind of butted heads a little bit, as Dusty alluded to earlier. The doing the whole who's in charge thing that some guys like to do when they run into each other. And she kind of was like, hey, maybe let's go, just back off on Miller just a little bit. I think he actually knew Julie, and he's probably affected by that right now. Which again, showing again why Naomi is probably my favorite character. She just shows like this real emotional intelligence that no one else really shows. So she's just a cool character. Anyway, after that, Miller and Naomi, they break into Julie's little comm device, her little hand terminal, they call it. And thankfully, they have the presence of mind to touch it, operate it through the sleeve, the bag that they have, the evidence bag. And they find out, one, that she's a real nerd. She's quoting Dune in her journal, so I don't know. I thought that was pretty funny. But more importantly, she mentions having, quote, the Phoebe bug, which we don't really know like fully what that is at this point. But she does mention like it's very important that you do not touch this horrible, disgusting brown goo. I don't know. So they get that and they're like, wow, that's kind of odd. And they're kind of trying to leave. There's a little bit of they at this point Miller's kind of trying to. I think he knows who these people are now, and he's interested in the fact that they were looking for someone tied into the scopuli thing. So his curiosity his residual curiosity in the Julie Mao case is causing him to want to work something out about going with them at least a little bit longer so he could find out more information, find out what they know. But as all this is happening, they receive a message from the OPA indicating that there is a mole in their organization that they fed the information to the death squad that came to kill them at the hotel, and that the death squad had succeeded in securing Julie's corpse to create some kind of bioweapon. They said something like stage 3 will be commencing shortly or something like that. And so that's another big hint, like, oh, something really, really bad is happening with the police. And I think I can safely say that this death squad, they were not just known to the police, but they were essentially part of the police at that point. I think we can pretty comfortably make that connection. Anyway, so shortly after that, they're talking, and they start to hear these sirens going off, and these very blown, muffled speakers. This is such a well written passage. Like if you've ever been in any kind of like chaotic situation, it really captures it very well. Like the people rushing around in a semi panic, the speakers that are supposed to be telling you what information you need to know. They're all pretty blown, and they sound very muddy, and there's just a lot of confusion. People rushing around. So anyway, they're trying to the station is going into lockdown, and they say that there was some sort of radiation spreading, and everybody needs to get to these radiation shelters, which at this point they're kind of the crew of the Rocinante and Miller. They're talking, and it's kind of at this point that Miller he sees one of these security guys, and he realizes that this is a person that he had busted previously on Sarah's station for a crime a few years back, and then he kind of looks closer and he realizes that riot gear that he's wearing is actually also from Sarah's station. So that's kind of that they're really having this moment of it's further and further, like as the reader, you're like, oh, you're really coming into this, you're getting this sinking feeling as you realize that this whole place, something is very wrong here. And so they're basically they're talking about what to do, and it's kind of funny. Miller and Holden, as they're talking, they have a little bit of a back and forth about. Miller is like, so when you accused Mars of, and then he's like, I didn't accuse Mars of anything, and it was kind of funny, their little back and forth there. It's showing their residual differing perspectives about the whole Scopuli Canterbury incident. It's pretty much played for laughs, but like Dusty mentioned before, they were talking and they're like, yeah, well, it's kind of curious about what's happening. Yeah, me too. Maybe we could go take a look. So they go on their little bro mission to go investigate what's happening, what's caused the station-wide alert, for why things are going so wrong. And they agree with Naomi. They tell her that, and the rest of the crew, but Naomi is like pretty much the second in command. She's the XO. So a lot of the stuff that comes from at least Holden anyway, he's communicating to her, and she's kind of speaking for the crew, and she kind of agreeing on their behalf in this instance. Like, okay, we're gonna go, was it 2 hours or 3 hours? I think she agreed to wait for 2 hours.
It was 3.
Oh, was it 3? I think she agreed to wait for 3 hours, and he's like, if we're not back, you need to get out of here. And she's like, okay, I'll do that. And then he's like, okay, good. Well, make sure you do that. And then she's like, yep. So it's kind of, again, this kind of little, it kind of gets back into what we talked about the last time. This little sort of like teasing back and forth between the two of them. It's this sort of like will they, won't they thing. But it feels like at this point, you're like, okay, it seems like she's kind of out on Holden, which is, okay. She's, it's a pretty fraught relationship, relative when you think about all the things that are happening. So anyway, they start to take off on their bro mission, Miller and Holden.
Yeah. So yeah, they're. I don't really know if they necessarily have a plan on what they're doing, other than just what's going on. Let's find out.
Yeah. Nobody ever has a plan in this book, except for the bad guys, it seems.
And even then. So, yeah, their plan is to go figure out, as best as they can, what's going on, what's with these radiation shelters that they're leading people to, why are they doing this, because there is no radiation leak.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's an important thing. Throughout this whole conversation, they were looking at their hand terminals, and they were saying, yeah, that's weird. My terminal reads 0 radiation.
Yeah, so they come upon a a group of people being led into a radiation chamber. It gets locked, and the all the guards leave except for two that are guarding it. And so then they hatch this plan to be like, we need to get in there. We need to see what's going on. So they go out, and Holden's like, hey, whoa, hey, we need to get in there. Oh, we got turned around. You know, we're not from here. And that's not really working. So Miller kills one, and the other one, he's like, hey, go ahead and open that door. And so the dude opens the door, and they tell him to walk in. He walks in and drops immediately. And they realize a little too late that that room is being flooded with radiation. So they get hit with it, and they can't close the door in time. And so now they have been infected with a high dose of radiation sickness.
Yeah, that's basically becomes like a secondary source of tension as they're going through. Like, you see their health starts to deteriorate as they're on this mission.
So now the plan is, okay, we need to somehow make it back to Naomi and the crew. However, it's not just as simple as we'll just walk back the way we came, because now there are more guards that are in between them. So they hatch this plan where they find another set of guards, and Miller kills one and shoots the other in the gut, and it's someone that he had arrested years prior. And that's a fun little interaction where he's just like, you remember me? I arrested you on Sarah Station. And he's like, oh, yeah. How's it going, detective? You get that fun little awkward conversation. And then, so Miller shoots him in the stomach. And the plan is to essentially use him as a way to get past some guards. They come upon some guards. And Miller's like, what the hell are you guys doing? There's some rebellious people. They killed one of the guards and injured this one. We need to take him to medical. And I should also say, the first guard that he talked to, that he sent into the radiation chamber, that's when he learned that this was all set up by Protogen to, Protogen used to have the contract on Eros, and they essentially set up and trained these guys that were brought in, these criminals that were brought in from Sarah Station, given the riot gear, and they were set up to do some sort of job there that they were going to be building towards. So Miller, when he's talking to the guards while he's holding the guy and saying, hey, there's these rebel people that shot him and killed the other guy, they're like, who are you? And he's like, I'm from Protogen. And that is able to actually pass for them. So the guards leave and they're able to continue, and they eventually make it back to the maintenance hatch. And this dude's the dude they're lugging around's long since died, so they just lug him, they just throw him away. And they open the hatch, and everyone is gone. The crew has left them.
Yeah, because they were 5 minutes late, but they were pretty explicit about during this conversation with Naomi. They're like, look, do not wait, leave on time, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Holden makes it a point to Naomi, hey, we're going to be 3 hours. If we're not back in 3 hours, and she's like, yep, don't be a hero. And he's like, don't be a hero. And they get back in, I think it's 3 hours and 5 minutes. And he's like, what the fuck? She left us.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty. I think that was moderately amusing, but I could just imagine being in that circumstance, like that sinking feeling. Just like, oh crap, I'm dying of radiation poisoning. There's all these guys out there that are looking to kill me. Just a truly profound sense of helplessness in that moment. And another thing that happened during this time that's kind of interesting is that we start to see, and this is what I was talking about earlier. Like, there's like a little bit of interesting texture to Miller as a character, where he's thinking about, he's become close quarter killer Miller over here. He's killed like, I don't know, 3 people at this point. I think he kills a few more, but he's like thinking about it, and he's like, I've always been pretty unaffected by killing people. He like thinks back to the first time he killed someone when he was like 22 or something, like fresh out of the academy and all that. He's like, basically, he's always been kind of like blasé about this, and that now, even doing it, he almost feels like a kind of pleasure, or like, or he says, or at least a brief cessation of pain.
Yeah, because he sees this as taking vengeance on Julie.
Yeah, he's doing this like he views it as like, yeah, taking vengeance on Julie's behalf.
So now at this point we have both sides of the story here looking to get revenge.
Yeah, that's actually, I never really looked at it in that exact way, but yeah, that is what's happening. It's these really the whole all crew characters, but particularly Holden and Miller are kind of joined on these like intersecting journeys of revenge. And he's last little thought about quick thoughts about Miller before we get back to the plot. But he starts to now he kind of as like a follow up to all of this violence and stuff. He's thinking about it. He's like, in all of these moments, I could justify them to myself. They seemed logical. But if you look back at the sum totality of it, like all of the death that he's left in his wake, all of the, all of the choices that he's made in his life, that just like he's saying, if this was my partner telling me all of this, I would tell them that they've lost it, that they've gotten, that they've gone off the deep end. And that I found that to be a very interesting passage. It's like very, very telling, very human. This idea of how we judge other people by the externalities, by the results, but we judge our own actions by our intentions. So in all of these moments, he's able to justify himself to himself, but he looks like in the abstract he realizes he's lived this very violent and dissipated life. And last little psychoanalysis of Miller here. He starts to imagine Julie like embracing him as well. So it's not like this one-sided limerence for this this fictionalized version of Julie, but he is now starting to imagine her like as a romantic partner, as his like she's like almost like become Joy in Blade Runner 2049. That kind of situation going on.
Yeah, I kind of missed the mark on that one with Miller being in love with Julie.
Well, I mean, I think it was a fair interpretation at the time, but I think they definitely have moved in. You can definitely see he's moved into a more romantic mode of engaging with his delusion, his imaginary Julie.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to note that he is in love with this construct that he has created of Julie, not the actual Julie who is now dead.
Yeah, that's very true. Like he only knows her in a very fractional way. Not like all of this is really like a creation and delusion, really, if we're gonna be brutally honest about it, in his mind. Like this fictionalized Julie, like that may not bear any real resemblance to the person whatsoever.
And did you notice, this is jumping back a bit, Julie has now officially, and has been for some time now, she has officially taken the place of Candace inside his head. She
so took Candace's place, I totally forgot about Candace until this very moment.
Because if you remember early on in the story, I don't think we ever went into this, he has his imaginations of Candace, which I can only assume is his ex-wife. He has this image of Candace in his head who will scold or approve of actions that he does, but I don't remember if she ever actually talks to him like that, and Julie at this point is talking to and interacting with him in his head. So she has replaced and encapsulated imaginary Candace at this point.
That is kind of an interesting point, and does kind of speak to another layer of Miller's character.
Yeah. So now, with the crew gone, the quest has now shifted from get back to the crew to get back to the ship, and that is not going to be an easy task. They make it down to the casino, which is what they have to go through in order to get to the elevator to get back to the ship itself. And there's a massive crowd of people there because people were led either to the casino level or to the radiation shelters. And so there's a huge amount of people here, thousands of people down here at this point. And they're trying to find a way to get through the crowd and somehow make it to the Roci. And suddenly, riots erupt, and people are going crazy, attacking the cops. The cops are shooting them down, and one of the cops kills a kid, and Holden's response is to just brute rush the guy, firing wildly, forgetting Miller's advice to aim for their neck because that's where the armor doesn't cover. Uses up all of his ammo, and the dude's about to kill him, and then Miller shoots him in the neck, and he's like, "I told you to shoot them in the neck. Come on, man."
There's a lot of really cool, like the action sequences. I mean, I think there is something to be said about Miller's, his realization about violence and maybe to a certain extent our enjoyment of watching this character be violent. But it is pretty amusing, like seeing all of his little quippy, like, "I told you, shoot them in the neck," and like shooting a guy in the leg and then shooting them and they fall and then they shoot him in the head. That kind of stuff. It's just it's very well written action in the story here.
Yeah. So they make their way almost to the elevators, and there's just a line of guards with machine guns just guarding it, and that's when the zombies appear.
They're kind of stuck. They're watching, like Dusty was saying, they're watching, a few waves of these people kind of get mowed down, and they're kind of trying to figure out what to do. The radiation is starting to get to them. They're coughing and spitting out blood, and they're like, "Oh, that's really bad." When they start to see emerging from this hallway these shambling people, they're walking, they're vomiting this disgusting brown bile. And it's at this point that they remember, this thing that it had been in Julie's notes, that whatever this virus is, that it feeds on radiation, or it experiences exponential growth when exposed to radiation. So these people have all become these walking, shambling plague carrier, basically zombies, like vomit zombies going through the crowd. And
Zombies, if you will.
Yes, the zombies start to emerge from every sort of hallway into the big concourse where the crowds are and the mercenaries are. And it's just this very gut-wrenching moment because they're sitting up on this level, on this overlooking all this happening, and there's a these very loud pachinko machines, like pounding in their ears, and they're seeing the crowd like start to like if you've ever seen like a bunch of deer or any kind of prey animal, like they start to how they start to like shrink back and then start to turn and bolt, and it's becoming this total chaotic scene. They see, the zombies start to approach. Some of them, they're being killed by the mercenaries now. They see there starts to be a distinction around this time of the police of the station and this group that they refer to as the mercenaries. And the mercenaries are, as Dusty mentioned, like they were the people that trained. They were the proto-gen guys that trained trained the police for this situation. Anyway, they can, from where they're sitting, they start to see they're pulling out. That the mercenaries, but they're not panicking either. They seem to kind of even know what's going on. So they're like, "Oh crap!" So they're like, "Okay, well, if they're going and they know what's going on, we need to follow them."
And we need to follow them before anyone else realizes this too.
Yeah, they make that point. So as they're going along, they see like all these kind of these very sad scenes of like, women, being, grabbed by the zombies and covered in this terrible sludge, and all these things going on. There's all this chaos and death. But as they start to close in on the mercenaries, they see from a distance that they're stuck in one place, and they're in this argument, and they're kind of not sure what's going on. They're like, that's weird that there's this sort of internal dissension within these groups. And then there's like this lone casino reveler zombie walking towards them, and Miller's about to kill this guy. And Holden kind of takes this as a moment to say, "You don't kill this guy. He's just an innocent victim, like all we are, and like we all are." And to which Miller's like, "Well, killing him is basically doing him a favor." And then to which Holden says, "Well, you don't get to decide that," which is like a very there's an interesting philosophical a difference in the philosophical outlooks here that we see in these characters. Again, we see Holden, who, as we've seen before, he has this very idealistic outlook on the world. And you see Miller, who's very jaded and very, he's like, well, he does, but also very cavalier, in his way of like disregard of like the use of violence. So I don't know. There's a lot to think about in that sequence. Like who's right, who's wrong. They're like he's not really a threat to us. We can just keep walking. Just walk. I think he literally says that. He's like, just walk faster. So they continue on the path, and then they see down at towards the end of this hallway, basically just in front of where they need to get to the Rocinante, they see a firefight breaks out between the mercenaries and the cops / Sarah Station thugs. They see a firefight starts to break out right there. So they're kind of watching from a distance, like this thing kick off, and they're like, okay, well, I can tell that the shots are coming from further and further off. They were like at very close range, but they seem to be kind of backing up a little bit. And as this is happening, they see this group of stragglers from the thugs camp starts to come by, and so they're like, oh, wait a minute. They basically realize at this point, one, they can get some armor, and two, that might be their inn. They could use it as camouflage. So they ambush the thugs, and they kill them, and they take their armor. It's a little bit splattered with blood, but they're like, well, look, we don't really. They're going to be at a distance. What we hope we can do is we can just run through the corridor and hope that at least one side doesn't shoot at us, because we're going to be wearing their armor. And so, I mean, it's not the best plan. Let's be honest, but it is basically the only thing left to them as the horde of zombies slowly follows them through this hallway, and as they're running out of time. So in absence of a good plan, a bad plan, any plan will do. So they go, and they basically they run, and they're like, yeah. Miller tries to radio ahead to the thugs. He's like, okay, don't shoot. We're coming through. We're something like that. And as they're running, they get shot like 3 or 4 times. And it mentions like in the low gravity of near where the ships are, there I think Miller is thrown against a wall and hits the wall, and then has to like crawl the rest of the way to the door of where the Rocinante is being kept.
Yeah, which, I mean, there's only like one shot apiece that actually does something to them. Holden gets shot in the calf, and Miller gets shot in the arm. Everything else either hits their armor or is just, it doesn't really affect them.
Yeah, they're in rough shape, but they're not like immediately in critical condition.
Yeah.
They're at least able to crawl to the door. So they get to the door, and they open it. They're just barely able to get into the Rocinante when they see Amos, and it's this big moment. We're like, oh, thank God. And this is something that I might want some clarification, or at least your opinion on. how I wonder how the crew of the Rocinante got from where they were to the from where they were to like to get back to the main place where the ships are in the Rocinante. I guess they didn't really explain that, but I was very surprised by the fact that they were still there.
My guess, I mean, I feel like it's one of two things. One, they made it to the casino level and were able to make it through before the mercs posted up and blocked off the port. Because after they actually were following the Marines through, there were signs of people being back there. We do see that the mercs are shooting anybody that gets in their path on the way to wherever they're going. So there are people back there. So my guess would be either they were one of the people that were able to make it back there before the mercs posted up, or two, they somehow found a way through the maintenance tunnel to get to where they needed to go. I don't know if that's something that's going to ever be addressed or not, but that's just kind of where I think it probably went.
Yeah, it was something like that. I guess it's not truly important to the plot, but it was something I did wonder. So anyway, they survive, but they're in really really rough shape. They basically they're in these medical beds. Naomi mentions that they had to use basically half of their medical supplies to keep them alive because again they were exposed to a lot of radiation. I think one of them lost like 1.5 feet of their colon, or their small intestine, something like that. Yeah, they were basically dead. they were really on death's door when they got on board the ship.
Yeah, Naomi even says that the automated med doc essentially put them on hospice multiple times and was trying to pump them full of morphine to kill them, and they had to override it. The triage, the automatic triage, they had to override it so it would stop trying to kill them peacefully.
Yeah. So they managed to, they're kind of waking up. They're stuck in the beds. They kind of pass in and out of consciousness, and we see kind of Miller in a daze, kind of like hearing Holden and Naomi talk, and he's kind of like he's piecing together, as we are at the time, that this is one of those kind of talks that are not where you can see where it's heading. It's Holden is about to kind of confess his feelings to Naomi, because we've seen this will they won't they kind of thing, and I guess in this sort of and we've seen Holden kind of express have this growing attachment to Naomi that he expresses. Especially as they've gone through all these traumatic incidents, and I guess this was the traumatic incident that broke the camel's back, and so he's like, I'm going to regret if I don't tell you this, and she's basically pleading with him, trying to give him an out, trying to get him to not say what she knows he's going to say, and even Miller, who's like in a state of semi-consciousness, is like, no. Don't do it. And so he's, but anyway, Holden eventually, says, I'm in love with you, Naomi. And then there was just like this very, very brief pause. And she's like, no, sir, you aren't. And so it's like this moment where you're getting all this secondhand, if not embarrassment, you really feel for this guy because he's, that is a big moment, and it just to fall flat like that. So anyway, she lays out some very, very sensible reasons why she doesn't feel like she wants to be with him. She mentions that he does have this tendency, Holden does, to form these very fast, in a very quick way, he forms these emotional attachments. He gets to the very passionate state, but then very quickly he basically backs it off, and she's kind of seen this pattern as she's served on the ship basically longer than he has. She saw when he joined the crew as the XO and had even been in consideration for the XO position herself. So she kind of didn't like him at first. Then she saw this kind of recurring pattern of behavior that he's like, he comes on strong, but then he kind of like denies systems away from these girls. And then then she kind of talks about like, even I, fell for you, but you're just because she's like even though you could tell that there were a lot of people that were attracted to you and you weren't necessarily attracted to them, you still treated them decently, which seems like a low bar, but being having lived a little bit of life, there and having seen some very cruel people, there is something to be said for Holden there, that he is, he does treat people, even if his patterns of behavior and relationships are a little bit avoidant and maybe a little cattish. He always tends to leave on relatively good terms with these women. So I think he is, at heart, probably a pretty good person, but he has a hard time differentiating between this sort of sense of attraction, this sense of like romantic or maybe sexual intrigue with a person, and like genuine feelings. He has a hard time differentiating between that. And that's where Naomi really comes down. She's like, I need you to figure out whether this is just like a little passing like fascination or like if this is going to be for real. And they basically leave it at that. And then she kind of Miller just kind of coughs at the worst possible time after basically Miller with a very relatable trying to hold in a cough at the worst possible moment and then it exploding out of him in a very awkward way. And then she's like, oh, hi Detective Miller. And she's, talks a little bit about their healthcare, the things that have happened to them. Anyway, she leaves pretty shortly after that. And so they're kind of in there, after she leaves, they're kind of sitting there and they're in their thoughts, and they talk a little bit. And this is another nice moment where we see the differing sort of like values and psychologies of these respective characters, Holden and Miller, where Miller is Holden kind of is talking a little bit about how Miller killed so many people. He saw Miller kill like 5 people on the station, and it's kind of rubbing him the wrong way a little bit. You can tell. And Holden is just kind of they kind of talk a little bit about what it means to take a life, and Holden actually admits that he's also killed people, but in a very through the abstraction of like he was part of the Earth Navy. And he kind of, the way he killed people was by blowing up their craft. He refers to there's, there were just dots on a scope, essentially. So he still feels like this, and I think maybe that's partially why he has this sort of, this very strong aversion to killing. Not just because that's like the sane, natural, and morally correct way of looking at things. I think that there is a certain... He realizes that despite the fact that it is abstracted through this... you're not seeing the person that you're killing. You're just seeing the results on your screen. I think there's something about it still, though, that is really stuck to him.
I do think that is a perfect distinction between Holden and Miller, too. It's a great way to show where Holden is at morally still.
Yeah. It's a very good sequence. It's one of as good as like the action in the zombie part of the book, a real page turner. On the night that I read through it, I definitely had just one more chapter syndrome. It was past my bedtime, and I was like, Okay, well, but I'll just read one more chapter. I'll just read one more chapter. Until they finally got onto the Rocinante. But anyway, to wrap up but that part actually is maybe one of the better parts of the book in terms of from a writing perspective, when you really get to see, these two men that ostensibly are very different, and the way they present themselves and choose to look at themselves is very different. But there is a certain commonality there that is very interesting. Anyway, so that part of the conversation kind of dies down, and Miller, he's like, "Hey, just so you know, I did kind of hear that whole thing with Naomi, and you really you owe it to yourself to really make the effort to be with Naomi, to hear out what she's saying, and be with her for the right reasons." And Holden is, as one would expect, very embarrassed by this, and he just kind of acts. He's like, "Yeah, why don't we just drop that?" And Miller's like, "All right, well, fair enough." And then as he's kind of drifting off to sleep, he has this moment with Julie, with the imaginary Julie, where she tells him that she loves him too. And there's as he's drifting off to sleep. So I don't know. I think that's kind of we've seen kind of like, I don't know. Maybe they're in that moment. Maybe it was just an in the moment comparison. This idea of like, because he's thinking about these things, and his imaginary Julie is like a reflection of that. I would like to kind of see, like, from a macro standpoint, does the progression of or is there any sort of correlation in any way between like the imaginary relationship between Julie and Miller, and the relationship between Holden and Naomi? That's something that I might want to keep an eye on as we go along.
Yeah, I feel like we're at another major juncture point in this book, where we've gotten our first major bit of real exposition, for lack of a better term, of where the story is going and what everything seems to be leading toward, and we have our heroes finally meeting up. So I feel like we are essentially now at the setup for the final act of the book now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I don't know. I'm very intrigued. This whole Phoebe virus is I don't know. That was pretty cool. Just the whole, like, it was very well written. Very like I said, I literally just blew past my bedtime by like an hour and a half or something, because I literally just could not stop reading. So I got to give a lot of props to the authors for that. It's just very exciting, and I'm very interested to see where this goes.
Yeah, me too. It's just a really good book, man. I'm having so much fun reading it.
Yeah, I remember texting you when I was reading as like something like it's kicking off, because I was just reading. I was like, oh man, I can't wait for Dusty to read it. He's gonna lose his mind. This is gonna be like, I knew you'd love it, so I was very excited for this weekend to kind of so we can kind of share our thoughts about where everything is going.
So I guess that'll do it for us this week.
Yep. That was we ended on page 320. So let's see. Try to get another 120 pages in for next time. So maybe that should take us to about 440. So if anybody is reading along with us, we'll be doing chapter 33 through chapter 43, ending on the first page of chapter 44. So I don't know. I'm very excited to see where this is going next.
Oh man, me too.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening and tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Yep. Take care.